my glass, got my plate, knife, spoon, fork. I got a good hot roast beef on top of the stove, mashed potatoes waiting, all ready for another dinner alone. It's been that way for a while now, but it didn't used to be that way. I never used to eat dinner alone. I had somebody, and it was good. It was good having somebody. But I've been eating my dinners alone here for a while, and that's not good. That's a sad thing. You know, my grandfather always told me, he said, it's not good for man to be alone. He said a man needs somebody to take care of, and he needs somebody to take care of him. So he said, boy, when you're old enough, you make sure you get married, have a family. So I listened to my grandfather. I listened to him. When I got old enough, I got married. Yeah, I got married. Married a beautiful woman. I mean, she was nice. I married a beautiful woman. I never did have any children, but my marriage lasted for 25 years. Yeah, I had a beautiful, beautiful wife, and we got along just great. Just great. She passed away several years ago, and that hurt me. That was a real, real bad time for me, losing my wife after 25 years. But I survived it. I made it through for a few years there, and then I realized, I said, I'm not meant to live alone. I said, no, I'm not meant to live alone. I've got to get out into the world and find myself another wife. I said, I don't like living alone. I don't like that at all. And so I got out into the world there, and I started meeting women and dating, and I found this woman named Estina. She was quite a few years younger than me, and I was kind of, weary there for a while and leery and everything else about starting up a relationship with her, but finally, I said, okay, I'll give this a try. And but she was just, to me, she appeared to be just a terrific woman. Like I said, even though she was quite a few years younger than me, I told myself, I said, I think I'm in love with this woman. I think I'm going to marry her. And so I did. I married. I had only known her about 9 months, and I married her. And I just figured, I have got myself a terrific woman. But, oh boy, was I wrong. Oh my goodness gracious, was I wrong. After I got married, I discovered that I had married a criminal. I was absolutely shocked and stunned beyond belief. After I married this woman, Estina, I discovered I had married a criminal. And I'm not talking about some little criminal. I mean, this woman was into big time stuff. This woman was into robbery, forging checks, breaking and entering. Oh, it was absolutely incredible. I said, no. I said, I gotta be wrong about this. But no, I discovered that this woman that I had married, she was into robbing places and writing bad checks and breaking into people's houses and all this kind of stuff. And I discovered that she was a liar. Oh my goodness, what a liar she was. She would say things about people, and I knew it wasn't true. And I would say, Estina, are you sure you know what you're talking about? And she would say, yes, I know what I'm talking about. And I would say to myself, my goodness gracious, my wife is such a liar. Oh, it was a shock. It was just an absolute shock. I found out, after I got married, I found out that my My wife used to belong to a gang. She used to belong to a gang when she was a teenager. They used to go around robbing people and breaking into buildings and setting buildings on fire and all kind of stuff, stealing cars. I found out that my wife and her brother, when they were younger, they had stolen a car and they were sent to some juvenile center for 6 months. They had to spend 6 months at a juvenile center. I said, my wife did all that when she was younger? Oh my goodness gracious, I just couldn't believe all this stuff. I just couldn't believe all this stuff. I found out that when my wife was in school, one day somebody set the auditorium on fire. And they said that Estina did it. They couldn't prove that she did it. But they always said that Estina was the one that set the auditorium on fire at the school when she was in high school. I found out all of this after I got married to this woman. And I said, oh my goodness gracious, I can't believe what I've done. I can't believe the kind of person that I've married. Yeah, I had married a criminal. I mean, like I said, she was not some small-time criminal. She was a big-time criminal. Every week she seemed to have something new. New pair of shoes, a new dress, a new coat, new jewelry. And I knew I didn't have the money to buy that stuff. Not with the kind of job I'm working. And I knew Estina didn't have the money to buy that stuff. And so I said, well, there's only one other way she could be getting it. I said, she's got to be stealing it. Oh, I was just going crazy. I was just going crazy. My wife was doing all this stuff. But the thing that really just blew my mind was the day that I was searching for something in our bedroom dresser. I opened up our bedroom dresser drawer there. I forget what I was looking for. But when I pulled out the drawer, there was this big stack of money. I mean, brand new money with the bank wrapper still on it. And oh, my heart just fell to the bottom of the floor. I said, a humongous stack of money. And I had heard on the radio and television, and I'd read in the newspapers that a bank had been robbed, and they said 2 females had done the robbing, but they hadn't caught them yet. And here I was standing in my bedroom with the drawer open, and here's this huge stack of money with the bank wrapper on it. And I said, oh, what am I going to do? I said, well, I don't dare say anything to Estina. I said, I'm going to let her come to me and tell me about this. I said, no, I'm not going to mention this to her. I said, I'm going to let her come to me and tell me about this. So I waited several days, and Estina never came to me and said a word. I waited 2 weeks. Estina never came to me and said a word about it. Meanwhile, all that money was in the drawer in our bedroom. And she never said a word to me about it. But the whole thing came to a head one day on my job. The police showed up. And they said, Mr. Thompson, we need to talk to you. Well, I'm the kind of guy, I'm not a lawbreaker. You know, I don't like having the police around me, to tell you the truth. I get nervous. I get upset and excited and nervous because, you know, I'm just not that kind of person who enjoys having the law around. So I said, what do you gentlemen want? I said, what do you gentlemen want? They said, well, sir, we prefer that you come down to the station. We'd like to. I said, no. I prefer that you tell me something now. I said, because I get nervous when the law is around me. And I said, I want to know what's going on. And so they were nice. They said, Mr. Thompson, we've arrested your wife on suspicion of bank robbery and several other charges. Ooh, I almost collapsed. They said, we want you to come on downtown. We need to talk to you. I was so nervous, I was just barely able to drive my car to the police station. And they kept me there 2 hours, talking to me, questioning me, grilling me. They thought I was part of my wife's gang. They had arrested my wife and some other woman named Lydia. And they thought I was part of the gang. They grilled me for 2 hours. They were insistent. They said, oh, come on, sir, admit it. You know, if your wife and this other woman were doing these things, you know you've got them. I said, oh, no, I wasn't. I said, oh, no, I was not. I said, no, I was not. I said, I am not a part of my wife's gang and none of that stuff. I said, I have a perfect record. I've never broken the law in my life. I said, no, sir, I am not a criminal. Yeah, they kept me there at the police station for 2 hours. Boy, did they grill me. And finally, they let me go. They halfway believed me, I guess. But anyway, they finally let me go. And I rushed home, and I went right up to the bedroom, and I pulled out that dresser drawer, and all that money was gone. And boy, was I glad. I said, well, I guess my wife and her friend Lydia took it. They're the ones who robbed the bank and stole it, so good, it's gone. It's out of my house, it's out of my life, and that's it. Yeah, my wife and her friend Lydia were now in jail on suspicion of bank robbery and who knows what all else. And I was a nervous wreck there for quite a while, and then as soon as I collected myself and got my nerves together, I went to see a divorce lawyer. Good lawyer, lady lawyer. I went in and I told her exactly what my life was all about. I said, I married this woman that I thought was just an angel. And I said, this woman has turned out to be one of the worst crooks you'd ever want to meet. I said, she's in jail right now on suspicion of, I said, I want a divorce. I said, get me out of this marriage. Get me out of this ridiculous marriage as soon as you can. And so she took my case. She said, okay, Mr. Thompson, I'll do what I can for you. Oh, my, I just couldn't believe how my life had just turned upside down like that. Falling in love, marrying, thinking I had something good. And, oh, this woman, Estina, had just wrecked my life. Yeah, I told that lady divorce lawyer, I said, get me out of this ridiculous marriage. I said, get me out of this ridiculous marriage. Meanwhile, there was a trial, and my wife and this woman, Lydia, they were convicted. They were convicted and sentenced to prison. And but the thing is, the day that they were being transported to prison, things didn't go right. Things didn't go right. There was a female officer in charge of them. Her name was Judy. And there was a male officer. I don't remember his name. But those were the two officers who were assigned to take my wife and this woman Lydia to prison. And, you know, in a jail van or whatever you use to take them to. They were transporting them to the prison, but things didn't go right. There was a terrible accident along the way. And this prison van ran down this steep gully. And it flipped over multiple times. Oh, it was a terrible wreck. It was a terrible wreck. The male officer was killed. And one of the female prisoners, Lydia, was killed. And this female officer named Judy, she was hurt very badly. For one thing, she was temporarily blinded. But my wife, Estina, didn't get a scratch. Incredible. My wife, Estina, did not get a scratch. She survived that terrible wreck and didn't get a scratch. And when she crawled out from under the junk and everything, she realized that all the shackles and cuffs or whatever else they had on her, they had all been broken away. She was just as free as a bird. There was nothing holding her back. Her chains and cuffs and whatever, they had just come off. The van had just been wrecked so badly. All of the stuff that was constricting her and confining her had been broken away. She was as free as a bird, and she had no injuries. So she figured she was going to run. That's what my wife, Estina, figured. She figured, hey, I'm going to escape. I'm going to get the heck out of here. But she heard the female officer, Judy, crawling around on the ground, calling out, please help me. Somebody please help me, I'm blind. And so there was a little bit of goodness left in my wife, Estina. She went over to this female officer, Judy, and she helped her find a place to sit down where she could be comfortable. And my wife took handkerchiefs and she tore some rags off of the female officer's shirt there and helped to bandage some of her wounds and wipe the blood out of her eyes. She did whatever she could for the female officer, Judy. And when she had made her as comfortable as she could, my wife figured, okay, I'm getting out of here now. And so she told the female officer, she said, I'm leaving you now. She said, I'm getting out of here. And the female officer said, please don't leave me like this. And said, please go get some help. And my wife, Estina, said, I'm sorry. Said, I hope somebody will come and find you, but I'm getting out of here. And so my wife took off running. Now she was down in this gully, this valley, this down in this steep crevice, surrounded by all kind of trees and rocks and bushes. But my wife thought she was going to just run to freedom. So she took off running out into the woods. She didn't get far. The stuff was so thick she couldn't get through it. The trees and the brush and the bushes, they were so thick, she tried her best to pick her way through that stuff. She couldn't get through it. And so she looked up and figured, well, I'll climb up to the highway. The highway was up this steep hill because they had run down this steep hill and crashed. So she figured, I'll climb up this steep hill to the highway and I'll thumb a ride or do something, but I'm going to get out of here. And so my wife tried to climb up that steep hill, but she kept sliding back down. She tried to climb up again, and she slid back down again. And oh, she got angry and frustrated. She found out she couldn't run out of that valley. She found out she couldn't climb out of that valley. So angrily, she turned around and went back to where the female officer, Judy, was sitting. And the female officer heard her coming, and she said, Estina, is that you? And Estina said, yes, it's me. She said, yes, it's me. She said, I tried to escape. I said, doggone it, there's so many trees and bushes and rocks around here, so I couldn't run out. She said, I tried to climb up the hill, and I couldn't climb out. She said, doggone it. Said, nothing went right. And so the female officer said, well, why don't you just sit down here and we'll wait for somebody to come rescue. And my wife Estina said, doggone it, I'm not going to sit here and wait for somebody to come capture me again. She said, this is my chance to get away, to be free. She said, I'm going to try again. And so my wife took off running again. She was just crazy out of her mind, desperate to get away, desperate for freedom. She tried all that again, tried to make her way through the brush and the trees and the bushes, and she couldn't do it again. She tried to climb up the hill again. She kept sliding back down again, tumbling, rolling. It was just crazy. And so finally she realized that she was not going to get out of that valley that way. And so once again she went back to where the female officer was. And she sat down beside her. She said, well, I tried again, but I couldn't get out again. And so my wife saw a pistol on the ground. And she looked over at the dead male officer, and she realized that his holster was empty. She said, oh, that's his pistol. So she walked over and picked up that pistol. And then she looked at the female officer, Judy. Now, her gun was still in her holster. So my wife went over and took Judy's gun out of her holster. What could Judy do? She was blind and hurt. She couldn't resist. And so now my wife had two guns in her hand, two loaded guns. But what good was it doing her? She couldn't go anywhere. She couldn't escape. So she just fired both of those pistols up into the air until they were both empty. And then she went back over and sat down beside the female officer. She said, maybe somebody will hear those shots and come rescue us. Well, my wife and the female officer sat there for 30 minutes, and nobody came. And so my wife said, evidently nobody paid any attention to those shots. And then she said, you know what? Maybe a fire will get some attention. And she said, do you have a lighter? And the female officer, Judy, said, no, I don't have. She said, you know, my buddy had a lighter. He was a smoker. The other officer, he had a lighter. And so my wife went over and searched the body of the male officer, and she found his lighter. And then she piled up a whole bunch of brush, and she set it on fire. And oh, it made a gigantic fire. I mean, the smoke rose up to the sky, and you could see it for miles. And then my wife went back over and sat down beside the female officer, and she said, maybe somebody will see that smoke, and they'll come and rescue us. And so they sat there for about 45 minutes. And then, just out of nowhere, they heard a voice up on the road saying, hello, who's down there? And so my wife jumped up. She said, whoever's up there, help us, we're trapped down here. There's been a terrible wreck, help us down here. And so whoever was up there on that road, they went and got help. Eventually, all kind of rescue vehicles showed up, and naturally the law showed up, fire department. Oh, it was just a gang of people showed up. And it took hours and hours to rescue them. They pulled up that wrecked van. They had to bring up the dead bodies of Lydia and the male officer. They had to bring up the injured body of the female officer. It took hours and hours to get all that done. And they took my wife to a hospital and examined her, and they saw there was nothing wrong with her. And so they made sure she went on to prison. They got my wife on to prison. They said there's nothing wrong with her. So they made sure my wife got on to prison. So there I was at home now with a wife in prison and a good lawyer working on my divorce for me. And the thing was, it was just weird what happened after that. After this female officer, Judy, healed from her wounds and everything, she went to the prison to see my wife. And she said, Estina, you saved our lives. And she said, I value that. And she said, I owe you, and I'm going to help you. She said, I'm going to do anything I can to help get your sentence reduced. So this female officer, Judy, she's a smart woman. And she knows a lot of important people. A lot of people like her. And the fact that she has survived this terrible ordeal, that just makes people like her even more. She's gotten her whole sight back. Her entire vision has returned. She's no longer temporarily blind or anything. And her wounds have healed good. And she is working hard to help get my wife Estina's prison sentence reduced. And like I said, this woman is smart. I have a feeling she's probably going to have some success helping my wife. So I got a letter from my wife recently from prison, and she wanted to know that if and when she gets out, if there's any possibility that she and I can get back together and live as man and wife. Ha ha! Oh, gee. Oh, what a joke. What a joke. Absolutely ridiculous. If I never see that woman again, I won't shed any tears. No, there'll be no getting back together, living as man and wife. Oh, that was the worst mistake I ever made, marrying that woman. The worst mistake. So I wrote back to her and told her, no, there's no chance of us being man and wife again. No, you can forget that. So I'll take some time to recover from this disaster that I got myself into. And when I'm feeling better, I'll get out into the world again and look for another wife. But you better believe that I'll make darn sure the next wife I get is a good wife. I'll make darn sure that my next wife is not a criminal.